Yes, thank you very much for giving NSOE the possibility to also add to the discussion. I have to apologize for our manager of system development, Dimitri Chaniotis, who was really supposed to hold the speech today, but he delegated it upwards to me because he's actually very sick. He has been sick for a few days and dragged himself here. And since my dentist appointment earlier went fast, which doesn't mean everything is soft in my mouth, I could do it after all. So cross your fingers for both Dimitri and myself. So these are Dimitri's slides, obviously. Only minor differences in style with my own. We are worried about us all running very fast and noticing only too late that there's a problem. As our last slide will show, we don't really think that is the truth, but the risks are certainly increasing in everything we're doing, and we've been using more and more the phrase institutional speed to characterize what we think we need to get better on, all of us. That holds for consensus between the TSOs inside NSOE, where we are getting better, but still have some way to go. But it also holds for controversy around network codes. It holds for photovoltaic retrofit programs within Germany. It holds for new legislation. It holds for the 3-year permitting that we're all talking about, and so on. Change is at the core of transmission network planning, always has been in a way. And if you think back many years to the 50s and 60s, early 70s, when many transmission lines were produced, there was lots of change in the electric system. It happened to be consensual change, exciting change. Everybody loved electricity and to some extent loved the new lines that came with it. And when there was little transmission planning, for 20 years or so, that was because relatively little change was happening at the time and not so much was necessary. Now, as we've heard many times today, much more change is needed from all those things that you can read and that have been talked about a lot, and therefore lots of transmission planning is necessary again. But the speed of change on some of the things outside transmission planning really go very fast. If you think about the political decision in Germany, but also in many countries in Europe, the speed with which renewables are coming into the system, partly as a function of subsidies and partly despite any subsidy decisions. I'm thinking about the Mediterranean countries where the grid parity of photovoltaics for household customers certainly seems to be here today, as it is in many parts of the United States, and where the grid parity definition, if you're more careful about it, as EPA usually is, and you define it as a wholesale power function, seems to be within reach, they think. And the investments, to some extent, go hand in hand with that, and that just adds up to a speed of change in the overall system that becomes rather hard to manage from a planning perspective and also from an operational perspective. NSOE is trying to address that for all the aspects of the TSO cooperation. Implementing the network codes will be absolutely crucial to keep control of the system and to keep it manageable and to avoid the blackouts that have been talked about at the end of the previous session. Enabling free trading through the market target model, congestion management, the cooperation between TSOs and power exchangers, certainly a key challenge. Enhancing coordination and operations is a big thing for us. It's one of the legal requirements in Regulation 714 besides the network codes. And we're taking it very serious, and we're trying to make progress both in reality and regional cooperation initiatives, and also mirror that back into the network codes. And of course, the infrastructure development, when you have so many changes to the generation system, is of key importance there. You have probably, I hope you have seen these slides about our newest 10-year plan draft many times. So there's 50,000 kilometers now, not 40,000. And because so much is needed and so relatively little has been coming, we very much also, and we agree with everybody who has spoken about this, we very much also appreciate the infrastructure package to consolidate the European approach on energy policy to accelerate the building of new infrastructure and to have even better coordination. We think it's indispensable to streamline permitting. The one-stop shops, we like them very much, and we very much believe the 3-year time limit is needed. I was very happy to hear from the Parliament, from Mr. Correa de Campos, that the Parliament likes this too. We hope this will be sustained in all the voting to come. And we've been arguing that if we don't have the 3-year time limit on the permitting process itself before lawsuits or things like that start in many countries, then we're not getting any improvement at all. So to us, that's absolutely crucial. We believe that for identifying the priority investments, the 10-year network development plan must be the basis. 10-year planning, as you could gather from just comparing how we did it the first time in 2010 to how we did it now, is a rather involved business. All of our TSOs were involved with major manpower, with many different groups within NSOE, 2 full years to make this happen. The network planning, building on the market studies, is a very involved process that nobody can do any better, and nobody can do as neutrally as the TSOs jointly, who have the legal mandate to do that in Regulation 714. And we're hoping very much that the TYNDP, being the basis for all these policy discussions where regulators, member states, the Commission then make political choices, that also survives in the legislative discussion. We see it surviving largely so far, but we got to be aware you don't want to duplicate all that effort. You don't want to question the TSO's network studies, you don't want to question the TSO's market studies, but you want to build on them. And how to do that right, indeed, like Mr. Correa de Campos, we see some fine-tuning may be needed, but be careful in the fine-tuning that you don't end up duplicating the network studies or the market studies. You will sow confusion, not make things faster. I think you're going in the right direction there, but in the policy discussions that are still coming up, we're hoping that this will be maintained. On the financing, we believe a faster, clearer road towards European guidelines is needed. We think they're foreseen already in Article 14, so the end goal seems reasonable enough, but there's a lot of ifs, whens, and buts, and a lot of different people doing studies and making judgments before you get there. We think we know enough about the issues to understand that European guidelines are clear. I very much tend to agree with David Haldren. Where are you, David? Right in front of me, as usual, when I don't see something. That in the end, of course, that's a regulatory decision, a case-by-case decision. In many of the projects we're talking about here, which might be bigger and multinational in the future, a multinational regulatory decision. But that by itself seems to say you want to have clear European guidelines about the principles. How are you going to do that? When a premium is a good thing and when it is not a good thing, rather than leave that to the national decisions and then getting confused whenever you're talking about the big multinational projects. So clear, okay, that the regulators have the last word on each project, but please give us a bit clearer structure as fast as possible, so this doesn't become a hang-up. This slide was just to emphasize the complexity of studies that have gone into the current TYNDP, and we, of course, are planning that the one that work has started on now for 2014 will be better yet on all these market studies. I don't want to really tell you too much more about the needs for new infrastructure and all the benefits that you can read on the slide that the new infrastructure is going to have. But that's a slide we've been using for 2 years now, and it still holds for what is the basic structure of transmission planning that I'm asking you not to duplicate by anybody else. You identify development areas for generation and load, leading to technical needs for new transmission. And then you do market studies in the middle there on the top to figure out what are the expected bulk flow patterns. And that captures an awful lot. If you do them right, that captures all the renewables integration as well. And then based on that, you figure out what kind of projects could have what sort of grid transfer capability increases and then becomes good projects. So those are the kinds of studies where you want to be very clear who does them within NSOE. Is it neutral? It must be the foundation. You only want to do it once. And how do you build each project promoter's own case for his project then on top of that? That's the tricky part, we believe, which still needs fine-tuning. We tend to share when we discuss among ourselves in a speculative way the ideas that Christian von Hirschhausen just mentioned about how much or how little merchant investment there might be. The logic you pointed out seems very convincing to us, but that's not our job to decide. We're open to merchant projects, and we're trying to set up a system where everything is building on the TYNDP, where merchant lines have a fair chance to compete with TSO's projects when it comes to the identification of projects of common interest. One more word about the multi-criteria analysis here. We've been trying to go as far as we think we can within the association of TSOs to quantify in some cases or else describe qualitatively 9 different criteria and also give an idea on the costs for the projects that are being planned in the next 10 years. And in that sense, through the market studies, network studies which feed into this, and through the qualitative analysis on other things, like security of supply, social environmental impact, and so on, we're leaving open for these regional groups, in some sense, only the most difficult parts of the multi-criteria analysis, which is to bring all the 9 criteria together and try to make a policy judgment based on well, how important is renewables integration, how important is security of supply. They tend to be measured in different measurement units. How do you bring them together? That's from our perspective something NSOE cannot do. That's why we are not doing it. That's why we like the idea of policy-driven regional groups. But that's, keep in mind, that's a tough job. And if you're trying to formalize it very much, if you're trying to turn it into an automatic machine, out pops the answer, and that's your policy choice, and you're going the wrong way. But I've heard all the speakers say the same thing. It's just a tool to help you. Keep in mind the part that we're leaving consciously open for you is the tough one, making things that are not measured on the same scale comparable. So the permit process and durations vary significantly. We've heard that many times. The 3 years are very important. We do think, especially since everybody loves to have relatively few big priority projects, and we tend to think in the same direction too, we do think there's a danger of downgrading the other projects. We hope that won't be the case. I agree with David when he says you got to be clear on what's priority and what's not, but if the result then is that nothing else ever gets permitted or everything else takes 20 years rather than 3, then we've shot ourselves in the foot. It's too much of one system. Incentivization, I've already mentioned. More concrete guidelines, please. Cost allocation, because of the difficulty of the whole analysis and the difficulty of multi-criteria, careful with it. We've had good experience with mutual agreements between TSOs and regulators. And in the end, we think we are okay if this package becomes the law and if those incentives on the financial side, but most importantly, the permitting, actually do become reality. Thank you, and sorry for a little more than 10 minutes.